fresh on the Trinity, which I had mixed. I'd looked in that book previous, looking for a sermon on the Trinity and couldn't find it. It's there, entitled God Alone, Not Alone God. And that very much fits the theme of today's discussion on how the Trinity is anything but alone. More on that later. I did want to underscore, last week's, I think the highlight of it, I'm suspecting for a lot of you, was that little bit of the sermon, Unitarian Christianity, from William Ellery Channing, who is considered the father of American Unitarianism with good reason. And I brought forth that snippet because I thought it framed rather nicely for us this hyper-rationalism regarding the Trinity. You know, in just the part we read, you know, Channing goes on and on about they made God into three spirits, and now they made Jesus into two, one divine and one human. What's going on? This makes no sense. And I did that not to belittle the good Dr. Channing, as I was reminded this morning. If you go to the Boston Commons in Boston, facing Arlington Street, which I think is on the southwest corner, if I've got that right, is an oversized statue looking into the doors of the church across the street, Arlington Street Unitarian Church, and it's William Ellery Channing. And if you stand in the pulpit of Arlington Street Church and the two doors are open at the back of the narthex, Channing is looking right at the preacher. And this is the church he served for most of his career in the mid-19th century. So, you know, so he's a good guy, love him to death, but I did want to highlight that hyper-rationalism and sole use of reason at getting at the Trinity, which sort of underscores all of basically Richard Rohr's book. If I had a voice, a singing voice, I've got a voice, thank goodness. Thank you, Mother Father. I would love to sing this, and I thought I might try, but I think I would give it up. Hymn number 58 in our Baptist hymnal, and in many Christian hymnals, immortal, invisible, God only wise. Immortal, invisible, God only wise, in light inaccessible, hid from our eyes. Most blessed, most glorious, the Ancient of Days, almighty, victorious, thy great name we praise. Unresting, unhasting, and silent as light, nor wanting nor wasting, thou rulest in might. We blossom and flourish as leaves on the tree, and wither and perish, but not changeth thee. Now, I could either argue against the lyrics of that hymn or argue for them, and right now I'm going to argue against them. I mean, ultimately for it, God is, to say that you know everything God is, everybody God is ridiculous. As a colleague of mine said years ago, we're humans. We can't fully understand God. If we could, our brains would explode, because we're just not built for that, okay? But on the other hand, we can, as that rather convoluted definition in the Oxford Dictionary reflects, that I read last week, reason gets you to a certain point, and then it gets you stopped, and ultimately it is a thing of reason, but it's really not. It's kind of like it is, but it's not. It's not, but it is. So God can be apprehended in many ways, which we'll get into. And I think that hymn is an example of how we tend to think of God as a benevolent monarch way out there, silent. We can't say, I do like the final line of the hymn, will help us to see, 'tis only the splendor of light hideth thee, which is kind of cool, you know, but. So what I want to focus on today, what Father Rohr focuses on in this part of the book is how we might apprehend God in ways other than reason, how we might experience God. We'll use reason to a degree. Actually, when I got into the book this final week, I realized that a lot of the history I did last week could have come from this book, and I wish I had done it because he told it better than I did. But last week we talked about the history of the concept of the Trinity. The Trinity, of course, the name the Trinity is not in the Bible anywhere. It was a concept finally sort of finalized in 325 at the Council of Nicaea. Father Rohr says, don't start with the one and try to make it three, but start with the three and see that it's the deepest nature of one, he said. This starting point, along with the contemplative mind to understand it, was much more emphasized and developed in the Eastern Church, which is frankly why it still sounds so foreign to most of the Western churches. All we know experientially is the flow itself. It means the flow of Trinity. The drama was set in motion and has never stopped. The principle of three became the operative principle of the universe, and it undercut all dualistic thinking. Its full cataclysmic implications are still slow in breaking into history. God is not a being among other beings, but rather being itself, revealed for any mature seeker. The God whom Jesus talks about and includes himself in is presented as unhindered dialogue. We'll stop here. Saint Bonaventure would later call such a God a fountain fullness of love. Any talk of anger in God, wrath in God, unforgiveness in God, or any kind of holding back whatsoever, the Cappadocian mystics would see as theologically impossible and forever undone in a Trinitarian notion of God. Acts chapter 17, verses 22 to 28. If somebody wants to start to pull that up and read. This is Paul at the Areopagus. There it goes. Right, the wonderful sermon sermon that Paul gives right in the middle of Greco-Roman majesty. And he presents this entirely different way of looking at the world, and this is just a portion of it.
I'll read it. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. Now what you worship as something unknown, I am going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. From one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the time set for them and the exact places where they should live. God did this so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring."
So, if Paul knows what he's talking about, God is infused in creation. God did not just create the universe in his hand and throw it out there and stand back, which is sort of the clockmaker theory of deism, if you know that. God winds up the clock and lets it go on its own, when he's not really present to us thereafter. I love Paul Tillich was one of the great mid-20th century theologians, another German who was getting out of Nazi Germany, known as an existentialist Christian theologian. And this one phrase that is one of his famous phrases sort of explains that. Tillich said, "God is not a being. God is being itself, the ground of all being." The ground of all being. But our usual approach to Trinity is mathematical. How can 3 be 1? How can 1 be 3? It makes no sense, as we heard Dr. Channing speak of last week. Rohr says it's our Western thinking that gets us in trouble. And don't worry, there'll be a question coming up, so you get to talk to me. I'm just stirring up the ground here for you. And this is what I meant to read before I read the wrong thing. Why do we get he says, so hung up on divine math problems? He says we owe a great deal of our Western thinking to one wonderful, brilliant man named Aristotle. It's amazing how one human being could have put together the foundations for what became so many of the structures of Western thought. Aristotle taught that there were 10 different qualities to all things. I'm not going to list all 10, 2 will suffice. He said there was substance and there was relationship. What defined substance was that it was independent of all else. So a tree is a substance, whereas father is a relationship. Son is also a relationship, whereas stone is a substance. Now, Aristotle ranked substance the highest. In other words, things are more important than relationships. This is typical Greek thinking. Substance is that which is independent of all else and can stand on its own. It isn't an adjective, it's a noun. Nouns are higher than adjectives. So what the West found itself doing in the earliest traditions by the 2nd and 3rd century was trying to build on Aristotle to prove that this God whom we had come to understand as Trinitarian was a substance. We didn't want an ephemeral old relationship God, you know. We wanted a substantial God whom we could prove was as good as anybody else's God. We Catholics did the same thing with our unfortunate definition of transubstantiation of the bread and the wine at Mass. Yet when this Jesus revealed to us Christians by calling himself the Son of the Father, and yet one with the Father, he is giving clear primacy to relationship. Who you are is who you are in the Father, as he would put it. That is your meaning. And if someone would like to read just a snippet of John 17, verses 20 to 26.
Got it.
You got it.
I ask not only on behalf of these, but also on behalf of those who believe in me through their word, that they may all be one. As you, Father, are in me, and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. The glory that you have given me, I have given them, so that they may be one, as we are one. I in them, and you in me, that they may become completely one, so that the world may know that you have sent me, and have loved them, even as you have loved me. Father, I desire that those also whom you have given me may be with me where I am, to see my glory, which you have given me because you loved me before the foundation of the world. Righteous Father, the world does not know you, but I know you, and these know that you have sent me. I made your name known to them, and I will make it known, so that the love with which you have loved me may be in them, and I in them.
So, Jesus seems to think, or at least John's version of what Jesus said, if you want to be critical about it, that God has made sure that this love is coming out to us.
Yeah.
And I don't want to tilt the scales on this too much, but I'm always drawn to the fact that one of the beauties of considering Jesus fully human and fully divine, which is a rational impossibility, is that it puts humanity to some degree into the Godhead. I may be theologically wrong on that one. Those of you who know more than I do can argue that. But I think that's been one of the important reasons why Christianity, generally speaking, across the centuries, has been so, despite some noticeable missteps here and there, has really been human-centered and lifted up humanity. Even with some doctrines some would consider we're of original sin. Even so, humanity it's really elevated humanity. But that may be a separate discussion. So tell me about this and your experience. Have you felt that love? Do you understand that love? Does it make sense to you at all? Does it sound crazy? What's going on?
You know, Sam, you said, if I understood you, putting humanity into the Godhead. And it's always seemed to be reversed to me. You know, to say that God created me and then he put part of me in his head, it's more likely that he created me and he put part of himself in me. And that's the way I've looked at that, and what you're asking about.
Yeah, that's well said.
And that's the way I feel in a relationship with God. Is that, well, there's part of him in all of us.
In the Jewish tradition, obviously predating Christianity, one of the major ideas that really elevated humanity at the time, really pushed civilization forward, was the idea that humans are created in the image and likeness of God. That was sort of the new idea. And again, it gave humanity for all of humanity's problems, which the Jewish scriptures well delineate. You know, and then Christians took that, and then Jesus, it seems to me, and I'm not sure I know how to adequately describe it, but ramps it up a little bit. That's not a theological term, but you know, it makes it even more real. So.
Well, I'm not sure if this is germane to what your question was, but to me, this has always been a non-issue. I mean, I taught a lesson on the history of the Baptist Church one time and had to look at the history of Christianity as part of it, and this was a big deal, though, y'all, in the first century. I mean, it was the idea that God was monotheistic. We were now focused on one God only, and Jesus came along and the Holy Spirit came along. But to my mind, it was always simplistic thinking, because, you know, if God is omnipotent and omniscient, he has the power to transfer his shapeshifter, y'all. I mean, he could be three persons in one without any difficulty. That to me is not an issue. And I don't understand why we don't, if we accept that he was omnipotent and omniscient, which means he pretty much do anything he wants to do, or she, or be a she, and then be a he. Why is it such an issue? And why so much theology over it? I mean, I don't understand.
You know, it's interesting, I guess I've always thought, I don't necessarily like the concept of the Trinity. It seems too forced to me. I kind of like Paul's statement in Romans that God created the university, and he's self-evident. That's all you need to know. But also, I have this fear of, and I've said this many times, if we get too hung up in trying to define God and how God's doing everything, it's one of those damned if you do and damned if you don't discussions. Because no matter what you decide, you're never gonna really know that's correct way of looking at it. It's almost like you're dancing around heresy to get into this and make it some kind of element to our belief in God, or requirement, I should say, to our belief in God. That's where I don't like to go. I think God's there, God's self-evident. He created us, and that's good enough for me.
Go ahead.
Something that sparked, when you were talking about Aristotle, right? Yeah, it was Aristotle. And saying that, you know, like a tree is a noun, but you know, I did this Sunday school lesson, a year ago or so, about trees, and they are relational, and we didn't know that. And I think, you know, to me, it's that sparked that, it really elevating the relationship, not worrying about the three entities, but it's the relationship. And that, I mean, it brings it back down to us too, right? And it's also in creation. There's a lot of relationship that we don't even understand. You have the fungi that help with the root systems with the trees, and the older trees are sending nutrients to the younger trees that aren't in the sun. I mean, it just, all those systems are already there that we are still discovering. And I think it is okay to look at the Trinity if we can think of it that way, of relationship. How does this affect us and our relationship with God and our relationship with each other too, and with the world? So.
I don't know that it's believe in the Trinity or not believe in the Trinity. The Trinity is described in Scripture. There's the Holy Spirit, there's Jesus, and there's God.
Right.
So that right there describes it. But I think what Roar gets at is the mystery of it.
Yes.
And we don't have to do the mental gymnastics to be able to experience the mystery. And I think we lose that in our rational society.
We accept
So
it
much of
in chemistry.
so much of religion is mental gymnastics.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Absolutely.
That's true.
They're
And
now-
that's why we have lost
Yes.
so many, in present times.
Yes, yes.
We accept in chemistry the fact that water can exist in vapor or as ice.
Right. Yeah.
Give me a break. Why can't we just accept that and move on? Because it's not fundamental to the gospel. It's not fundamental to our concept of God and his ability to forgive.
I would disagree. I think it is fundamental in that it's the Holy Spirit that prompts us to say yes to God. It's Jesus that gives us the example, and it's in the image of God that I am even able to create and co-create.
Aristotle was wrong.
Yeah.
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 That's
Bottom
what
line.
you're saying.
It's about relationship.
The tree is not in
Well,
and of itself, it has
what
relationship.
the point Roar is making is that in the history of Western civilization, we have assumed that, you know, we didn't have the science that told us all the stuff about trees. I want to say, well, what about a rock? Of course, you get right down to it. A rock is also connected, just not as immediately and as wonderfully as trees might be. So ultimately, we know in our science, kind of everything holds together, you know, but that certainly wasn't available to Aristotle. And regardless of whether Aristotle was right or wrong, Western Civ, and I don't mean to diss on Western Civ more than I wish we would. It's advanced much of civilization. It's been a good thing overall, but like everything, there's weak spots, and they show up here. Is that if you apply this objective scientific reasoning to God, it gets you a little bit of the way. Actually, at some of our new science, it's actually kind of going back, and Rohr talks of that, and we'll get into that, I think, maybe next week or maybe this week. This is kind of shifting, but I want to do the rubber band thing before I have one rubber band, and I may not have had enough to go around. I'm sorry I didn't go to the store yesterday to get more rubber bands. If I may demonstrate, because I didn't need one. If you'll take 3 fingers, for most of us it would be your thumb, that, and put them in the band, and then push them out, and see how that feels. What happens? Tension. Your pushing out is creating centrifugal force, and then, as good engineers should know, and others, immediately there's this opposite force of centripetal force pulling in. I suggested 3 fingers for obvious reasons. We could have done 5, but that would blow my whole theory. So,
Who's the thumb?
3 digits, I should say, 3 digits. And Rohr uses this as a little experience of Trinity, he says. Because he talks about this flow within the Trinity that naturally goes outside the Trinity. Later on, and I haven't read this part yet, he speaks of humanity as perhaps the 4th person of the Trinity, which sounds pretty heretical. We'll see where that goes, but how we have access to this anyway. But if you feel and that's a scientific principle, we've just experienced it, you know. You push out, you get force pulling you back, and maybe that's an example of Trinity, of Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer, Father, Son, Spirit, Father, Mother, Christ, Spirit, various names, are canoodling with each other all the time, and naturally pushing out, and yet always staying sort of in touch. And I'm already probably speaking heretical language, because treating the 3 as if they're separate, and we know they're co-eternal, co-substantial, co-this, co-that. But he speaks of this flow within the Trinity and outside the Trinity as a dance circle, that's the name of his book, The Divine Dance. And he says that God is not just the 3 personas of the Trinity, it's the dance itself. Again, he might say, I don't know that he does, the process over the substance of it. In fact, when we say co-substantial, which is official, Oxford Dictionary says that, so it's true. It's got to be true. The word substance gives a little bit, as Rohr said in that passage, gets a little kind of weird, because, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, the Catholic thing on communion, you know. So any reflections on that? How would you say that God is like a rubber band?
Why are we even looking now to Greek philosophy, to Aristotle, for interpretation of what's fundamentally a religious or spiritual issue?
We're looking at it because Rohr says, and I generally agree with him, if I understand him correctly, that this is so shaped the Christian world and thinking. In fact, here's a quote. Here is the sad, this is Father Rohr, here is the sad trade-off that most Western believers have settled for. Science is allowed to give us the big field of objective and helpful knowledge. And religion is allowed to give us the smaller subjective field of personally meaningful wisdom. Our anemic and split mind Christianity mass produces both fundamentalists and practical agnostics inside the church and sincere atheists outside of it. In another place, he says that the fundamentalists are on the right and the agnostics and the agnostics are on the left. What a shame and a loss. Perhaps we have been lacking Trinity. And I want to throw this in. We've got 4 minutes. Good stuff is always at the end. It's always the stuff when they're walking outside the door that therapists know that.
moment.
Therapists and ministers know that. When you've been trying to talk to them for an hour and outside the door, they say, oh, by the way, I'm getting a divorce. Slam.
Yeah.
Well, why didn't you tell me that? You know? Anyway. I did make a note of when this was. Upwards of 6 weeks to 2 months ago, Pastor Timothy in a sermon made a side comment, whatever he was talking about, that the mainline Christian churches don't believe in God, always. That's not his words, but act as if they don't believe in God. And I was like, whoa, yes. For me, I believe that, hallelujah, brother. Told him that after the service. And I wish I should have written it down and go back and listen to that sermon again. But my experience has been that very same thing. Not that to say we don't believe in God is an overstatement, but to say that could be interpreted a lot of different ways. But I think generally speaking, and it fits with what Father Brewer says too, that Aristotle, cold scientific objectivity, case in point, back to my Unitarian heritage, Thomas Jefferson, you've heard of him, was theologically held to Unitarianism. He was never a member of a church. This is before the split off, I think, with Congregationalism. But he took 2 Bibles and a razor blade and went to the Gospels and cut out, he had to have 2 Bibles because he had to get both sides of the page, and he made a document that was later published after his death as the life and ethics of Jesus of Nazareth or something like that. It's known as the Jefferson Bible. And it's the story of Jesus taken from the Gospels. All the 4 Gospels are just thrown together, of course, with all the miracles taken away. So you get his pure ethics. And I will tell you, a lot of people on the Unitarian side love this book because it's the core truth of the Bible. It gets away from all that Greek mystery religion that Paul talked about. And this is what I'm busy detoxifying from in here, people. I have to say this, I wish this weren't recorded, but I assume, you can't take away my retirement. Anyway, this real experience with God. God is a real experience. And I know in the room we've got a lot of doubters, and doubt is a good thing. Doubt can take you to a better place. But to get stuck in doubt is at some point, you've got to go up against the culture. Now I will say, I'm aware that I listened to some podcast when I was on a trip several weeks ago by 3 scientists, supposedly renowned, 2 from Britain and 1 from the US, that says at the beginning of the Big Bang there had to be consciousness there. It's just they say it's just a lie, that it's all this stuff is happening, And I was just like glued to that, and I need to go back and find. And I've got another book at home that I haven't read yet, had for a couple of years about that. Some of our science is moving away from the materialism of the mid to late 19th century and moving into thought and consciousness. They're not saying that God is necessarily behind it all, but they're certainly opening that door just a crack to say there's some meaning to all of this stuff. It's not not meaningless. It is time to go. Thank you. I appreciate that you come in here, and I'm sure Greg Garrett was much more eloquent. It's fun. And no, you may
Things
not
can
do
be
that.
used in very bad ways.
I was gonna say, you shouldn't do that. The devil made you do that,
Well
Scott.
done.
What does that mean?
Very good.
You may keep the rubber band as a memento, or you may give it back to me. I'm fine either way. Thank you so much.